All right, that recording is our cue to get started. So again, good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen, and from everyone on David's team, we just want to say thank you for being here. We are truly thankful that you've committed to being with us here today. We're super excited about sharing all this time with you, and we hope that everyone's able to take away something meaningful. As some of you may already know, David has more than 35 years of experience as a family therapist, workshop facilitator, lecturer, advisor to leadership executives from all over the world. He's a best-selling author, respected thought leader, incredible teacher, and continues to spend much of his time traveling and delivering keynote speeches on authentic leadership to audiences across the country and beyond. David's passion for helping people connect to their most authentic self is evident to everyone that meets him. And he has a genuine gift for connecting people with the best and most real versions of themselves. This complimentary webinar, this monthly webinar, is just one way that David loves to give back and connect with this community. During today's session, David's going to share a powerful presentation that will offer 3 ways to help you overcome any blocks that currently exist between you and a satisfying career. Whether you're a positional leader, charged with creating an inspiring workplace, or in charge of creating one for yourself, it's always good to take a step back and take an inventory of your life and career. And this is what we're here to do today. So once again, thank you for joining us this morning. It's wonderful to see people from all over Alberta, Nebraska, Manitoba. We love seeing leaders that are committed to learning and growing, to finding the best versions of themselves and creating cultures where everyone around them can do the same. So without further ado, here's David.
Thank you, Kristen. I always appreciate your presence. And thank you, everybody, for joining me. So this is going to be a 90-minute webinar. The older I get, the less comfortable I am with just lecturing at you. Although I'm going to probably present for 50 to 60 minutes and give you a framework and some reflections and some things to think about. And then we're going to stay on if you have time, and I would absolutely invite you to stay on for the last at the hour. It's 11 o'clock here Mountain Time, and so we'll end it by 12 Mountain Time, and then we'll have a half an hour for some dialogue, for some questions and answers, and hopefully we'll build a community. I'm just one voice of many who have signed up for this, and I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I know there's lots of wisdom on this call, so I hope to extract some of that wisdom in the conversations afterwards. So as usual here, folks, I like to mention that for those of you who resonate with this material, want to go deeper with it, I offer a 4-day Authentic Leadership Academy, both in person and virtual. And if you're interested in that, we'll have the links available for you. I just want to make sure that you all know about this. I think there's a big difference between leadership development and learning about leadership. So we all have this access to learning about leadership, webinars like this, and YouTube videos and podcasts, lots of opportunities to learn about leadership, but it's very different than leadership development, where you really invest in your own development as a human being. I'm old school. I come from a place where we used to send leaders away for a month a year for their leadership development, and we've gotten away from that in this high tech, accessible. We just don't mistake learning about leadership with true leadership development. So I just want to plant that seed. I want to be transparent with you and upfront and open that that's one of the reasons why we have these webinars. So folks, for the next hour here, I'm going to take you on a journey. And it's a journey in self-discovery. It's a journey in just understanding yourself a little more. It's my premise that if you want a great career in your life, no matter what you call that, we got to stop and pause and really reflect on what does it mean for ourselves. So this is my intention that however you define that, there will be an opportunity to reflect on what does it mean to create a culture? What does it mean to build a community? What does it mean to really have a good and solid, fulfilling career? I'm going to give you some of my thoughts around personal career development this morning, but anything that I share with you, you can use with your teams. So if you're a positional leader, you can take any of the material, and the slides will be, at least the video recording. And if any of you want any of my slides, just drop Val an email and we'll make sure we get them to you. But if any one of you take any of the material and use it with your teams, use it with those that you serve, you can apply it that way. But for now, we're going to really just focus on you, because you can't really take anyone where you haven't been. So it's hard to help your team members and members in your organization develop a satisfying career if you don't have one yourself. So it starts on the inside. I want to take a moment and pause here. As we speak in the luxury of our air-conditioned homes or offices, with a computer in front of us, as we think several thousand people around this planet, certainly been more acute here in our own country, have been displaced from their homes. And I think my parents would, if you're sitting here able to listen to this webinar this morning, I think my parents would call this privilege. And with privilege comes some responsibility. So I just thought we should take a moment this morning, a moment to pause and reflect on those who have been displaced from their homes, from their communities, who are in massive disruption right now, whether it's through fire, whether it's through war, whatever that case may be. It's an unsettling time, and I just hope that I can do my part to make a difference. But I think it's important that we just pause and recognize that first, right off the bat. Okay, I view the world as a big pot, and you know, some of us, when we're overflowing, when we're feeling good, and we're feeling grateful, and we're feeling happy, we've got something to give to that pot. And then make sure we give. When we're in a position of privilege, it's our opportunity to give of our time, of our resources, of our kindness. And then sometimes when we're low, when we've been depleted, when we're not feeling at our best, then we can take from the pot. And just make sure in the course of our lifetime, I hope to give more to the pot than I take. And that way, this is what enriches our lives. Okay, and I hope I can give you something today that enriches your life. You know, there's lots to be concerned about today, from climate change to divisiveness in our organizations. There's lots to be concerned about. And this is, you know, what I know about leadership is that regardless of what you're concerned about, where it's valuable to put your focus is in your sphere of influence. And this is what my life's work is, and this is my way to make a difference in this crazy world that we live in. It's my belief that if we have harmony with ourselves, then we can have harmony with others. And then we have harmony with others, we can begin to have harmony with the planet. And it starts with harmony with yourself. And this is the very premise of the work that I do. Just to give you a cross section, I've been in this leadership development field now for really 40 years in one capacity or another. This is a cross section of some of the organizations I've worked with over the years. And let me just give you an observation of what I've learned about culture and about leadership and about your own career development as a backdrop here. I view culture as a lot like a garden, and it's not a one-way, it's an organic process. And one of my early mentors, Virginia Satir, had a quote, and this quote has stayed with me for years. And I use it often. No plants ever grow better because you demand that they do so or because we threaten them. Plants grow only when they have the right conditions and are given proper care. Cultivating the best environment and the proper nourishment for plants and people as well is a matter of continual investigation and vigilance. So what I'm really saying here is I'm going to give you three principles. Number one, culture is a verb. It's not a noun. It's an organic process. You give to the gardener. As positional leaders, we're gardeners of the souls of people that we serve. And that's an organic process. The plants give back to us, we give to the plants, just as human beings do. I look at culture like if you look at a grocery store, for example, we've all been in a grocery store, and we can think that there's a culture in every store that we walk into, but culture isn't something that people do to us. It's something that we help co-create. If you walk into a store, you are now a part of that culture. And your interaction with the team member in that culture will impact the way that the team member connects with you. We co-create a culture together. It's an action. It's a verb. We go back and forth. And our interactions together help co-create a culture, just like the culture that we're creating in this webinar today. You're responsible for your own career development. As I say, blaming and waiting and expecting are not really very effective strategies for having a fulfilling career. We can all blame and point fingers at our bosses, at our cultures that we work in to say, you know, this is such a bureaucratic culture. I can't really have a fulfilling career here. But I'm here to challenge that a little bit. So let me just start with a premise. What if you rated this webinar? You know, if we, at the end of the webinar, we typically rate the webinar at the end. We give employee engagement surveys while they're in employment. What if we asked you to rate this webinar before the webinar begins? You know that, you know, many of us feel like, okay, I'm here to produce a number. And if I perform well, we'll give this guy a 10. And if it doesn't get much value for you, I'm going to give you a 1. Well, what if you took responsibility for your own number? What if you said, you know what, I'm going to make this a 10. Now, maybe it's the worst experience you've ever had in a webinar. Maybe you don't like what I have to say. Maybe it was not organized to your expectations. Maybe I didn't meet your expectations. But you know what? I'm still going to give it a 10 because I learned how not to do a webinar. I learned how not to be a leader. And so if we could take responsibility for our own number instead of blaming and pointing fingers at what we're doing wrong in the world, which is really a defense against our own lack of courage to take some action. How much value? What if we all began with taking responsibility for a number? For example, if we rated this webinar at the end of it on a scale of 1 to 10, is it possible that what this one webinar could be would be a 3 for some people and a 10 for others, a 1 for one person and a 10 for others? Same webinar. And I'm going to suggest we co-create that, even though you're having to listen. And it's what my mother would call an Irish or one-way conversation. Being Irish, she knew that well. So even though it's a one-way conversation, your energy that you give to me helps create the experience that we have together. And then it will particularly highlight that when we have a conversation afterwards. Your energy and passion will impact this culture. It's what my parents would call the law of the echo. Whatever we give out into the world will come back to us. So if you want more love, and this, by the way, this is marriage counseling 101, marriage enrichment 101. If you want a better marriage, if you want more love in a relationship, be more loving. Be what you expect. Be the change that you want in a relationship. This is one of my beliefs. If you want more accountability, don't wait for people to be accountable. You take accountability and bring more accountability to the culture. If we want more meaningful work, bring more meaningful work because you create the culture. You know, the ultimate act of accountability is realizing that we actually are complaining about the culture that we're helping to create. And once we make a decision to say, I'm the one to change, I'm the one to step into doing my part, I'm the one to shine a light on the gifts here, then we begin to create a new world around us. My third principle, and this is the missing link in the work that around fulfilling careers that I'm going to spend the session on for the rest of the time together, is how to turn your career into a craft. Whatever that career is, how do you turn it into a craft and take responsibility for carving out a part of your career to call it a craft? Well, what would that look like? A musician must make music. An artist must paint. A poet must write. A teacher must teach. A leader must lead. An architect must design if they're ultimately to be at peace with themselves. Our work, folks, is a tool to create what really matters in our life. And what if we could begin to make our work be a work of art, and that we're actually having a vision to create something that's of beauty to the world rather than just a job, And this is the vision that I'm going to present to you today. Pablo Picasso said, I wake up depressed every day and I start painting and the depression lifts. What is it that you must do to lift you? What is it that you must do to feel alive in your life? There lies within every person a place where when we're connected to it, we feel deeply and intensely alive. At such moments, there's a quiet voice inside that says, this is the real me. How connected are we with that authentic voice inside of ourselves? The greatest privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. This is authenticity. And this is about the craft of bringing our authentic self to our lives and to our workplaces. We are all naturally creative, compassionate, calm, committed, and capable. And if we're not, it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us. It means that we have disconnected from our true nature, the true nature of who we are meant to be in this planet, in this lifetime. When the deepest part of you becomes engaged, says Gary Zukav, in what you're doing, when what you do serves both yourself and others, when you do not tire on the inside, but seek the sweet satisfaction of your life and your work, what then? Then you know you're doing what you're meant to be doing. How many of you have ever had a performance review where you were asked, how's your sweet satisfaction? You know, we're moving, this is not something that historically has been asked, but we're moving more and more toward what Peter Drucker, the great management guru, said years ago, that we're managing volunteers. We have so many options today, you know, in this virtual world, in this hybrid world, in this world where we have high demands on our organization and our leadership. We have lots of opportunities to find employment elsewhere. And my premise is that we're managing now volunteers where people, you know, if any of you, I've always spent time in a volunteer organization. In fact, I had a client for a CEO once who said, I never promote anybody who hasn't spent time managing people in the volunteer nonprofit world. And his premise is if you can't motivate people without a title, there's no way I'm going to give you a title. When you work with volunteers, you understand that you have to inspire them without a title. You can't use your title you have, you know, your positional power means nothing in a volunteer world. You have to engage them in their passion and create and inspire them to want to work there. This is the work of leadership. And the model of working with volunteers, I think, is very apropos. So I'm going to just go back for those of you who have heard my lecture about authenticity. We're all born authentic. This is the authentic self. We're all born as a seed of possibility. We are born, folks, with a genius, just like an acorn seed is born to be a giant oak tree. We are born with a genius. We are born with a destiny to be fulfilled. What happens, however, among other things, is that we live in this world that puts demands on us. And in order to fit in order to feel attached, in order to belong, we give up our authentic self in order to meet the society's demands, in order to feel safe. And we develop in many ways what I call an accountable self, in that we are responding to the demands of the world. And then there's also another self, which, you know, when someone says, to thine own self be true, which self are we really talking about here? The adolescent self is this self-serving, impulsive self that just wants things to be pleasurable. And what I'm suggesting is that it's very easy in this, as we develop an accountable self, to lose contact with our soul's desire, with the craft of developing our authentic self and bringing that fully to the world. Once you connect with your authentic self, you won't have to motivate anybody anymore. Once you connect to that, once we create systems that help people connect to their authentic self. And then what I really am, my dream is that the adolescent self will begin dissolving and it will be integrating the accountable self with the authentic self. But it's very important to be aware of how much we have given up our authenticity in order to fit in and in order to meet the world's need. You know, people have said for years, I've had my own business since 1983. And people have said, oh, surely it's been easy for you to be authentic because you have your own business. But in fact, a good part of my business was built on being accountable to the customer. So a client would call me and say, you know, we'd like you to come in and develop a leadership development program for us. You'd like us to come in and speak on leadership. What do you offer? And my response is, what do you want? And then I give them what they want. And I've developed that account. In fact, I've spent a good part of my career teaching people how to be accountable and how to meet the client's needs. But at some point, there's this wake-up call that happens. And there's been a series of wake-up calls, particularly over the last 10 years in my own life, where I've begun to say, you know, I can build a good cash flow business meeting the client's need. But what serves my soul? Where is my soul's desire? And this is where, you know, during my brother's passing, taking care of my brother for 3.5 years when he died of cancer, the whole awakening of these master classes and academies began to be birthed to say, I want to take people who want to go deeper with this material. The whole COVID situation awakened in me, I want to be more authentic and I want to create a business that's more aligned with my soul. And I love to speak. That's still, and I love to design presentations. I love to meet the client's needs continually today, but I also have to integrate that into what I want to bring to the world, what really I feel called to, where my genius is. And this is where we began to create these stage programs, these ongoing peer mentorship programs with people that want long-lasting change rather than just the hit of a presentation. And it began to integrate these two together. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying, how can we integrate these two together? And how's the balance in your own life between being an accountable person and being an authentic human being? So I'm going to raise this notion of developing a craft. And I'm going to use the last 40 minutes here in my presentation to give you the 6 steps, if you will, for developing your craft, and whatever that is. And even if you're in a position where you may have, quote unquote, retired from your career, you still have a genius inside of you. And even though you may not have a role per se, but you still have this opportunity to have, how do we bring our authentic self to the world? Now, when we bring that authentic self to the world in our paid work, we call that a vocation. When we bring our authentic self to the world in our non-paid work, in our life's work, then we call that an avocation, and both have value. But I would ask you, where are you developing the craft of bringing your authenticity to life? So we're going to talk about first self-awareness. You have to connect with yourself and know yourself. An inspiring vision, a commitment to lifelong learning. Now once you have a vision, then you have a reason to learn. Then you have a reason to say, I'm going to learn so that I can develop my craft. It gives me a whole other reason to collaborate. Let me tell you, this has been one of my weaknesses in developing my own craft, is that I taught how to collaborate, but it's been one of my biggest challenges is how do I build a team around me to help support that vision so that I can help other people find their gifts. Contribution, it always has to make a difference and make the world a better place if it's by my nature a true craft and it's aligned with your authentic self. And then there's a passionate pursuit of mastery, a disciplined practice. And I would suggest that how many of us on this call have a disciplined practice in pursuit of mastery in some area in their life, and so that their work becomes a work of art. Now, I'm going to use the metaphor of an artist and a musician and a poet, but you don't have to be an artist or a musician or a poet, but your work still has beauty. And how can you begin to see it? So let's talk about this self-awareness, first of all. I'll go through these one at a time. Don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is for you to come alive. So let me just stop and ask, what makes you come alive? You have to be self-aware. You have to be connected with yourself in order to know that. We each have a calling in life. A commitment, an engagement happens when your soul's desire intersects with the world's need. And so if you're only accountable, you meet the world's need. And if your soul's desire, where does that integrate into the world's need? And this is the cue, the clue for getting engagement in organizations, is to begin to have these conversations. You know, that you've all seen, you know, anybody who's been through any of my presentations knows that I use this metaphor with the ikigai. The Japanese have a word for this, is where your gifts and your passion intersect with your contribution. That which you are good at intersects with that which you love, that which the organization needs. Now, how many of you today could stop and say what your gifts are? What is your passion? You see, this is the challenge, is that so many of us are disconnected with our gifts and our passion, not because we're bad people, but because we have spent our lives meeting the needs of other people in our life, meeting the needs of our customers, meeting the needs of our boss, meeting the needs of our family. We've given and given and given, which is a very vital task on the human journey. But how many of us in the process have neglected developing our own gifts and passions so that our service comes from overflow, not from emptiness? Up until about, and this is, I want to spend a moment talking about, up until about 10 to 15 years ago, it was unavoidable that time and again throughout the day, it was just you alone with your thoughts. Well, in a line at the pharmacy, waiting for the elevator, walking the dog, commuting to work, or at the gym. Now we've banished it. There is no opportunity to stop and become aware of what our inner thoughts and voice is. And so you wonder why we're so out of touch with ourselves, because every free minute, walk downtown, sit on a bus. Notice that we have banished any opportunity to just sit and be with our thoughts, because we immediately pull this device out and are immediately consumed with either one of two things. We're consumed with being entertained, or we're consumed with the demands of other people, so that it just accentuates this accountability self within us to say, oh, if I have to be available 24/7, I'm immediately connected to the world. I'm immediately connected with what other people want from me, which is it's a great tool for that. But if we don't have any opportunity during the day to sit and be with our own thoughts, we will be disconnected from our authenticity, and we won't know what our craft is, because we'll be so busy meeting the needs of the world around us. And so if you learn nothing from this, just create boundaries around having your device, so that your device, when you come home at night, sits on a table at the front, at the entrance when you come in, so that you have boundaries when you're having supper and connecting with people. And we know, and that, I don't want to go down this trail too deeply, but for those of you who have children, young people in your homes, we have to have boundaries around this technology. And it is not promoting a sense of well-being in our homes and in our personal life by continually being available to the world and not having these moments of thoughts with ourselves. We like to start team meetings with this feeling wheel. It's a language, most of us, if you say, how are you feeling? Well, we're mad, sad, or that's basic, or happy. Those are basically the three emotions. And we have to learn, if you're going to connect with your craft, the doorway in is to connect with yourself, to know, what are you feeling in any given moment? How are you feeling today? Precision leads to connection, which leads to self-awareness. If you're out of touch with your passion, it means that you're out of touch with yourself, because this is the nature of children. is that they're not accountable. They have to learn to be accountable. But the good side to that is hanging around children is their true nature comes out until we contaminate it with this excessive internet use, which again, if we're not careful, we can lose contact with ourselves. If any of you had the experience of being with a young child over the course of the summer where there was no access to the internet, you saw a very different energy. And by the way, some of you may have been in places where you had no access to the internet. It accesses a whole new side of yourself. Think of the times that you have not had access to the world through the internet and what happens to your soul, what happens to your being, and then what happens when you shut that off, when you go back to work and you disconnect from who you are. So that one of the practices you can begin is to start the day with a journal and say, how am I feeling today? Now, let me give you a quick example of this. You might wake up and say, okay, I'm just start my journal. How am I feeling today? I'm tired. This is the number one feeling that people tell me today when I ask them how they're feeling. I'm tired. Well, now you got to break that down a little bit. What kind of tired is this? Is it physical tired? Maybe you were up, you didn't get enough sleep last night. That's one tired. Maybe you're tired because you haven't connected with your soul and you're doing too much transactional work and you're not doing enough transformational work in your organization, and you've been so accountable that you haven't been authentic. If you're disconnected from your authenticity, you're going to get tired. As we say, burnout is not about hard work. Burnout is about heartache. And if you're disconnected from your heart and you're not bringing your heart and soul and your genius to work, you're going to get tired. Maybe it's you're tired because you just simply don't have enough boundaries. You haven't said no enough. So stop and reflect. What does this tiredness really mean? It's a doorway to get to know yourself. Typically, when people come into the office, instead of taking 5 minutes and asking what the tiredness is, what we immediately do is just pick up a cup of coffee and we just get the hit from the caffeine, and then we wonder why we're stressed. Because we haven't connected with ourselves. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with coffee, but before you have a coffee, connect with yourself and find out what is going on in your day and reflect on that. One of the practices of connecting with your authentic self and creating a craft. The seasons of well-being. Many of you have seen me present this. What season are you in today? This is about self-awareness. Are you in a disruptive period? Are you in a depletion period? Are you in an emerging period? Are you in a renewed period? You see, if you're in a disruption period, you're consumed with a lot of fear, loss, loneliness, self-doubt. And that's a part of life. We don't honor the disruption in our life. We always think you got to be renewed, you got to be passionate, you got to be focused and purposeful. Well, that's going to be inauthentic if you don't allow yourself to go through the seasons. What a balanced life is a person who can circulate through those 4 seasons. One's energy, one's craftsmanship comes through cycles. Now, if you don't allow yourself to be, we've been through 3 years of disruption the last 3 years. And if we don't allow ourselves to feel that loss, every one of us experienced loss through this pandemic. Every one of us experienced some fear, some loneliness, some self-doubt, anytime we're going through kind of a disruption. And if we don't acknowledge that, it'll turn to anger, it'll turn to irritability and rage and divisiveness. And if it internalizes, it'll turn to depression. As we get to know ourselves, these are the seeds of craft, of a master in our craft, of bringing that authentic self to work. Now, maybe you're in a depletion season right now. Maybe it's muddled and unfocused. Everywhere you go today, Kristen and I just had this conversation before we started. We talked about how busy we are. And my answer to that question, is it a good busy? Is it a good busy? My response when people tell, it's a badge of honor to be busy. Worst thing you can do is go to a cocktail party and say, well, I'm not very busy. Well, I'm not very busy. But if you look at the busy, what kind of busy is it? Is it authentic busy? Or have you been too accountable to people and lost contact with your authentic self. Now, if you happen to be in that depletion cycle, which I see most of my clients are in that depletion cycle right now, where they're exhausted and it's unfocused busyness and they're burned out and they're stressed, I always ask, what are the needs that you have that are unmet? And what boundaries do you need to start to begin to set for yourself? So don't judge yourself for being depleted. What you can say is, this is an indicator that we can connect more deeply with our authentic self, but you have to make room to do that. Don't leave your devices on your bedside table so that you wake up before you even connect with yourself. You're already listening to the news or finding that you're, going through your Facebook feeds. The quest for being true to oneself. This journey is not realized by what we want or need, but what we feel deeply called for, called to. This is a deep calling within us. And most of us are out of touch with that because we've been so responsive to the world in order to feel safe. That's my premise. My daughter, my example here, we raised our family here in a town that's a sports town. And if you're not an athlete, you feel less than a good citizen. You feel less than worthy. And my daughter was not an athlete. She tried to be, but she didn't play hockey. She didn't play soccer. And she felt less than. And it wasn't until she was in high school and discovered musical theater where she found her voice. And I can tell you that one of the most rewarding experiences of my life was watching her when she went through university and she took a fine arts and an education degree. And she went to a month-long clown class. And this is where, if you look in her eyes, this is where she finds true joy. She found her craft. She found her authentic self. And now what she's doing, she's a high school theater teacher and teaches theater and English in high school. And she's absolutely found her thing. This is her life's work in terms of working, and the challenges that she had growing up is integrated into her gifts. Stay weird, folks. The last thing we need are adults that try to be normal today. And normal is just someone that you just don't know well enough yet. Okay? So connect with yourself and honor who you are without judgment in a compassionate way. All right. The next point is to start to, after you connect with yourself, then you can begin to say, make room to create an inspiring vision for your craft. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them to tasks and work, but rather inspire them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Well, there's a yearning, there's a sea within us. What is the immensity of the sea within us that we have yet undiscovered, that is yet undiscovered? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? As you'll frequently say that, the number one reason why people get out of bed in the morning is to pee. Well, it has to go beyond that. What inspires you to get up early? And if you have a craft to say, this is what I want to do with my life, this is what I'm called to do, and I can only maybe spend 10% of my work life doing it, or I have to do it right now away from my work. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you connect with it and bring it, if you can, bring it more fully into your paid work. But whatever it is, what matters is that you connect with something that inspires you to get up early in the morning. And maybe you get up early in the morning to exercise so that you can be strong enough to live your passion, to live your vision. What gets you up early rather than just simply getting your job done? You become then a lifelong learner. Once you have a vision, you become a lifelong learner. To say, this is what I'm called to learn. Now when I go to the library or look up the internet, I have a reason because I want to devote my life to learning my craft and bringing it into the world. And becoming a learner, a lifelong learner, not just for the sake of biding your time, but for the sake of now you have a reason. If people aren't accountable, they don't have enough reason to be accountable. And what a vision does is it creates that region and brings curiosity into every interaction that you have. It also brings a sense of collaboration. I need other people. Who do you have in your life that will help support your vision? Who have you shared your vision with to say, this is my craft, this is my genius? Or if you don't have it, if you haven't discovered your genius, then you have an opportunity to collaborate with people to help find that. And so that you can begin to live that fully as opposed to just surviving. You know, how many times have you heard people say, how are you doing? Well, I'm surviving. Is this what we want to do? Spend a third of our adult lives at this thing called surviving? Work is such a powerful tool to create to express, to discover what your genius is. A community is people who support you and hold you accountable for finding your genius, bringing that out into the world to serve the world and helping you stay on track with that. This is the birth of the SAGE forums. I just have to put a little plug in. I know we've got one of our facilitators in the call today, who we facilitate these peer mentoring programs with people that come and support each other to be authentic, to grow, and to be their authentic self in the nature of a safe environment where they meet each month. And these are amazing groups that have outgrown me and that will live beyond me. The next point around developing your craft is it has to contribute. It has to make a difference. I learned this years ago when we raised kids. By the way, this is my youngest daughter, who's now a police officer. But this is my youngest daughter, and she taught me something. When you bring out a vacuum cleaner with a 2-year-old, they want to help. We inherently have this God-given desire to want to make the world a better place. And what we do to foster accountability with kids is don't do things for kids. Create a climate, an environment where kids have an opportunity to give to the environment, to be givers rather than takers. It's the difference between contribution and chores. So just ask yourself, when you go to work, how much of the work you do really makes a difference? Is how where your craft and vision and authentic self is aligned with the values of the organization versus just coming and doing chores. There's nothing wrong with chores, but that's not what inspires us. We need to feel that we actually make a difference. And so we would often sit down. I learned from my parents, they were a generation ahead of themselves. I remember my brother complaining about doing the cho jobs, taking out the garbage. And my parents asked him, we used to have these family council meetings every Monday night. And my parents would say, okay, you could bring, they would call them beef and bouquet sessions, and you could have complaints as long as you brought a recommendation. And I remember my brother saying, I want to take over the family income tax. That was his contribution. Now, my brother was brilliant. And my parents, in their great democratic way, said, well, okay, so much for democracy. But what they said is, let's give the books over to my brother when he was 15. And to the 2 years before he went away to boarding school, my mother, to the day she died, would say that was the only 2 years that the books were balanced. He did a masterful job. That's a contribution. Now, he still had to do chores, but we don't complain so much about the chores when we're contributing, when we're making a contribution to the places where we live and work. Okay. Contribution. How can I bring value here? Be a giver, not a taker. Whenever if you're working on developing your craft, just look around your world. And this is the first statement of leadership. How can I bring value here? How can I be a giver here, not a taker? And this is this urge for contribution. It begins to align you with your authentic self. Okay. Now I want to spend a few minutes here talking about the passionate pursuit of mastery and having a disciplined approach. Once you begin to say, this is my craft, and if we had some time together, I would love to hear how you've identified that. And we're gonna take some time. If you want to stay on the call after, I would be most curious at knowing what is your craft. What is your craft? And what are you doing to actively, in a disciplined way, pursuing it? I want to share with you what I mean by a disciplined practice. It's what we call a life of focus, where you carve out structured, consistent, uninterrupted time to understand and develop your craft, and to make disciplined time to do that. I'm just taking a course right now from one of my mentors, Cal Newport, who's a computer scientist professor at Georgetown University, and he talks about deep work and creating contained time where you don't allow yourself to be interrupted, but that you actually have boundaries, what I call boundary time, to say, this is where I am going to develop and strengthen my passion. Okay. And a couple of points that I've been taking away from the course. Number one, inspiration is for amateurs. You see, what we wait for is the muses to come and inspire us with great work. And what you'll notice is the difference between amateurs and professionals is that amateurs want to create the environment that gets it right. You can tell the difference between an amateur author and a professional author, because an amateur author will get the cabin in the mountains and get all the environment just right so that the muses will come to them and they will be able to create and manifest their destiny in the right environment. And if you've read anything by Stephen King, in his book about how he writes, most of a good deal of his books are written in hotel lobbies. What he has is a disciplined approach to writing, where he might say, I don't know how many words a day, but he says, maybe it's 1,500 words. And you say, I'm going to write until I get 1,500 words done. And then we're done for the day, but I'm going to write until those come, whether the muse is there or not. You just have the discipline to do it. And its inspired work should flow through my pen. This is the myth, the muse myth, that, and it may be through your computer screen. I'm going to work until I'm inspired, and I'm going to be in this flow state. And I think we mistaken working on your craft and being authentic with flow. Now, there is a flow state that can happen where we lose all track of time, but but let's not wait for the romantic circumstances to happen in our life in order to live our authentic self. I think we have to, in my mind, the reality is it's often more like training in a gym. You just show up and you do it, and you feel better about it afterwards, but you don't wait for the inspiration to come to you. It comes by the right action. So my encouragement for folks is to set up a structured time to discover, okay, and maybe that time is just to discover what your passion is, to turn off technology and to bring out a journal and to do some writing or get some coaching at understanding what that passion is, and clarify what is your craft that you want to develop and consciously attend to in your career and in your life, and have work be a place where that can come to fruition. But you have to attend to it. You have to set up structured time, and it may not necessarily be inspiring. It's bloody hard work. I have heard this line that once you find your passion, you'll never work another day in your life. That has actually not been my experience. It's still bloody hard work to get past the writer's block. This is what with the myth of the writer's block. To think that we aren't, to think that you're not going to have a writer's block is like going to the gym and taking all the weights away. The writer's block is the gym, is the weights in the gym. That's the work of writing, is to work through that. And it's bloody hard work. You just write. Well, I got commitment today. I got my hour. I'm going to get my 1,500 words today. It may not be inspiring, and most of what I write today might get deleted tomorrow, but I'm just going to write. I would never have written my books had it not been for that discipline. Now what I'm wanting to do is to connect. I continually write. That's one of my crafts because that's how I learn. But my real passion is to bring people in community and bring people together to connect with their authentic self. One of the requirements that I have in my academies is that you leave your devices at home, because what happens is you get connected to your heart in the community, and then you go at the break and pick up your device and you go right into your head and you miss connection. You lose connection and contact with your authentic self. And my passion is to connect people with their true nature and to bring it consciously and intentionally into their work. Developing mastery is not necessarily the same as the flow state that we see when you just, there's lots of literature around the flow state. It's mostly predominantly related to athletes, where you get world-class athletes that get into that flow state while they're skiing down the mountain and they lose all track of time. And that can happen, but it's not a requirement for developing and expressing your craft. So another way to say this is that you map out your energy. And just this is a nice, hopefully, little tool here that you can use. There's 4 components. There's short-term satisfaction, which is happiness, and long-term fulfillment. And if it's short-term stimulating but not fulfilling, we call that stimulating. If it's not fulfilling or stimulating, we call that slogging. Sacrificing is what my parents lived. I remember asking my dad, he had taken early retirement because of depression, and he did not listen at all to his authentic self. And what he did was sacrifice himself. And I will be forever grateful. I asked my dad once, "Are you happy at your job?" And he said, "What does happiness have to do with anything?" He said, "My job is to create enough money so that I can pay for your education. That's the purpose of my job. And I will be forever grateful that our parents and grandparents paved the way through their sacrificing. But let's not think that we are now going to live in a world that has to be stimulating, or I'm going to jump ship. I don't believe that we want to go into a world where we only live in the sacrificing quadrant. But I also want to suggest that you don't always have to be in your sweet spot to call it a fulfilling career. There's a balance between these 4 seasons. Sometimes, folks, we just have to roll up our sleeve and get the work done and slog. But if we're always slogging, we're going to become depleted. If we're always sacrificing, we're going to become depleted. And if we're always working on something that's stimulating, there's no meaning in that. And so this is a little map that you can use with yourself and your team in the last year, in the last week. How much time did you spend in each of these quadrants? How much time was in your sweet spot? How much time did you spend sacrificing, slogging, and stimulating? Now, it's not possible that that's going to be in complete balance, but over the last year, could you suggest that those 4 quadrants are relatively balanced in your work life? This is what keeps your energy going, and this is what I believe makes a fulfilling career. But you have to have some time in that sweet spot where you're really carving out, maybe it's that 10% on your desk, to say, this is my craft, and I'd like to really develop that craft. It might not have anything specifically to do with your work, but if you're fulfilled with your craft, you negotiate this with your manager to say, if I develop my craft, it'll bring more satisfaction and gratitude, and it'll fill me up more, and I'll have more to give in my sacrificing and in the slogging opportunities in this organization. So folks, I hope I've given you something to reflect on. Stop. And if you don't even know what your sweet spot is, it just means that you've been overly accountable. If it means if you don't know what brings you meaning in your life, if you don't know what your passion is, just carve out some time. That's what I want you to take away from this. Carve out some time to reflect on it. Carve out some time for undivided, uninterrupted focus, to begin to reflect on it, to begin to have conversations with some confidants, trusted colleagues, coaches in your life, to say, I'd like to actively pursue getting to know what that genius is. It is in there. Even though you may not be aware of it, it is in there. Okay. So these are the 6 points that I covered. I hope that this reflection has been meaningful to you. I hope that you can stay around and we can visit afterwards. I want to, again, offer this invitation to you. If you feel like you want to go deeper with this and be in a community of people that want to engage in deepening their authentic presence, these are the 2 options. I know Marg, my Vice President of Client Care, who's on the call, will be putting those, probably already has put those links in there. We're also having a mini series that gives you a little taste, a virtual taste of what is going to be in the Academy in 4 areas. And Marg will have those. Those are complimentary for you if you want to sign up and become more aware of this, because this is really my passion, is to get people in a community where we can engage in our authentic self and support each other to be authentic and stay in our hearts, connect with our passion and our purpose, and bring that more fully to the world and create a community around that. So I'll leave with this last slide. After my academies and intensive workshops, I always say, take some time, and I'm going to actually invite you to do the same thing today. Some of us, like I've sat through webinars and multitasked and missed the opportunity to connect with myself. But if you took the opportunity today to just have a few moments in this last hour to stop and connect with your authentic self and connect with whatever, without judgment, whatever you're feeling on the inside, if you begin to connect with that, I'm going to suggest, don't just rush back into the demands of the world. Don't just rush into picking up your text messages and your emails and lose the opportunity to connect with yourself. Just take 5 minutes. You know, I'm a student of yoga, and at the end of every yoga class, there's always the hardest pose of all, which is Shavasana, which is mean you just lie down and you integrate the class into your body. You integrate, what does it feel like to have gone through this experience? And I'm going to suggest that you have your own, suggest that before you move into the world, take 5 minutes of silence where you don't look at your device. You just take 5 minutes to just connect, take a deep breath and connect with your awareness. What was this experience this last hour like for you? What's missing in your life? What's fulfilling in your life? What is your genius? How are you practicing your genius? How are you connecting with your genius? What is your practice to keep it disciplined, to say, I'm developing my craft? And so what I recommend when we offer this academy up in Banff before the pandemic, I said, take a half a day to reflect before you go back into your busy. In fact, I always say, take the weekend off after this very intensive 4 days. Take the weekend off. And this particular email was sent to me by one of the executives that went through our academy up in Banff just before the pandemic. And he walked around Lake Minnewanka before he drove home. He lived in Lethbridge, and before he drove home, and he sent me this picture with this statement, this email that went with it. Attached is a photo that symbolizes for me the role of an authentic leader. The fir is bent from the ongoing storms, but stands tall to hold the space where the aspen can grow. This, folks, is our work. Now, he would not have noticed this if you don't slow down and see the beauty around us. Beauty is all around us. How would you have noticed this if you're looking down at your device? How would you notice this if you're racing through life with all the demands? Stop, slow down, and pay attention. And what he saw was this beautiful image of holding the space, you being strong. The best gift you can give the people that you care about and the people that you serve in your personal and work life is your own development and your own strength, so that you can hold the space authentically for people to be who they're meant to be. So on that note, I will stop. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you can stay afterwards for the last half an hour here.